I'm glad this news dropped over the weekend because it actually gave me a couple days to really think and process this. And if you're new to the channel, I love speculation and I love weighing out the ideas of what might unfold. So this is something I've been very much looking forward to talking about at the start of the week. And in case you missed the news, basically Tesla registered a new variant of the Model Y with the EPA. There's fairly little we know about it, but here's what we do know. Tesla labeled it as the Model Y all-wheel drive. So most people are referring to it as the standard range dual motor Model Y, although keep in mind Tesla did not use that terminology, but essentially that's the main difference with the long range all-wheel drive option that Tesla is currently selling, and this new one is they've dropped the long range, and according to the EPA, it's slightly more efficient than the long range Model Y, but not by much, and has a maximum range of 279 miles. That's about 50 miles less than the long range Model Y that we've had for over a year now, which means there are now two configurations of the Model Y listed on the EPA's website that are currently not being sold. The other one being labeled as the rear-wheel drive Model Y, fairly similar to how Tesla dropped the standard range terminology on the rear-wheel drive Model 3. Maybe because the range has got so much better, Tesla doesn't want that to be viewed as, you know, the standard range option. It's fine. It's just the basic amount of range, which is good enough, and the long range. But speculation on this new configuration is off the charts right now. Some people are saying this is a lithium iron phosphate battery, some people saying it's built at Fremont, others saying at Giga Texas, some saying Tesla is already planning on introducing BYD Blade batteries into their models, and that's what this is. And I've read a lot of forums, and I've read through a lot of comments, but in today's video, I'm going to be telling you why I believe this is the 4680 battery Model Y coming out of Giga Texas shortly, even though, yes, I'm a huge fan of lithium iron phosphate, and I've been crossing my fingers hoping Tesla would make a LFP Model Y soon, but here's why I don't believe it's lithium iron phosphate. First of all, because LFP is inherently less energy dense, it requires more batteries to get a similar kilowatt hour rating or a decent amount of range. And I've noticed that even in China, where they do have a lithium iron phosphate Model Y, it's only on the rear-wheel drive option. I believe this is because that extra motor, not just the powertrain itself, but all of the wires and cables connecting to that powertrain add to the overall complexity in the bottom of the vehicle, and the reason they do LFP on rear-wheel drive Teslas only is because they need that extra space on the bottom of the vehicle for additional battery cells. Yes, Tesla has switched to LFP in the Model 3, but they're only building the Model 3, at least in the United States, at the Fremont facility. So far, as much as we're aware, there's no plans for Tesla to start building Model 3s or start shipping lithium iron phosphate batteries to Giga Texas, because here's another fact that we're aware of. Giga Texas has been optimized from the ground up to do 4680 batteries with the structural pack. Even in these pre-production units that we're seeing hundreds of stack up outside the facility, we know, thanks to the internal pictures that Tesla has shared with us on investor earnings calls, that these Model Ys, the black and blue ones sitting outside the facility, have the 4680 cells. They are structural. And yes, at one point Elon said if the 4680s aren't ready, they have a backup option to go with 2170 cells. However, as far as we're aware, there was never a backup option to fall back on lithium iron phosphate or BYD batteries, which is still mostly speculation at this point, and Tesla is mostly just rumored to have signed a deal with them or a contract somewhat recently. It's not necessarily confirmed, and it is still very early in that contract phase, so I don't think those batteries would be ready yet. And the truth is, Giga Texas is very close to coming online, with hundreds of vehicles now sitting outside the facility, which means sooner or later, Tesla was going to have to submit a certification for a new trim of the Model Y. Regardless of if it was long range or performance, we know that the structural pack in the 4680s is going to result in some kind of weight change. It's got to change the efficiency, so that's where I bump up against the rumors claiming that, oh, this is a LFP Model Y and it's probably coming out of Fremont, since Giga Texas is coming online soon and that factory can take over long range and performance orders. Even if Giga Texas was doing that, I think we would see the EPA certification change, and maybe we will in the coming weeks, I don't know, but there would be a different version of the long range or a different version of the performance that has slightly different miles per gallon equivalent or slightly different highway or city driving range, and we're not seeing that. So far, all of the long range and performance Model Ys have remained unchanged according to the EPA, and keep in mind that Tesla has a tremendously large backlog for the long range Model Y, and the Fremont factory is screaming at full speed trying to build out all of these Model Ys with 2170 cells, and the truth is Tesla doesn't want an Osborne effect effect, where they introduce a far cheaper Model Y that's $50,000 or so, because then everybody who, of course, is trying to get a Tesla as soon as possible, who's trying to stop paying for gas prices, they're just gonna buy the cheapest Model Y that suddenly becomes available. So if you had tens and thousands of people waiting on their Model Y order, and then you introduced a $10,000 cheaper version of the Model Y, you know how many people would modify or cancel their original order? You would suddenly have all of these people backing out on their $60,000 purchase because they now are going forward with a $50,000 purchase instead, which I don't think is necessarily the best thing for Tesla. Maybe, yeah, from a consumer's perspective, it would be great for all of us because now we could all get Model Ys much sooner and much cheaper, but Tesla's already said on previous earnings calls they are not cell constrained, they are chip constrained. And because they've said that, that's what's made me to believe there's no incentive right now for Tesla to start offering cheaper vehicles, because the demand is off the charts, and if you know you're gonna sell every vehicle you make, why sell cheaper vehicles? So then, of course, the next question I'm sure you guys already have is, well, wait a minute, at Battery Day, they said 4680s allow for these better range improvements, and the structural pack allows for better efficiency and lower weight, so why then are the 4680 batteries with a dual motor powertrain coming out of Giga Texas have 50 miles less range than the 2170 cell option? I believe it is because they don't necessarily want the Giga Texas Model Y to be an abundantly better vehicle than the long-range Model Y coming out of Fremont. Because if it was, let's say they did decide to make the long-range Model Y, and let's say they got way better range thanks to the structural pack in the 4680 cells, then you would have 350, 380, or close to 400 miles of range on a vehicle that Texas is not going to be able to ramp up at high volume very quickly. But if everyone found out that there was a much better Model Y coming out now, and you had to do X and Y, Z to order it, I think you would get a ton of people all wanting to order the Texas-made Model Y, and a bunch of people backing out on their Fremont orders, which Tesla doesn't want. They want that factory operational and delivering vehicles to people non-stop throughout the year. So they compromise a little bit, and they make the all-wheel drive but standard range Model Y, which has slightly better efficiency, slightly worse range, and my prediction is that it won't actually be that much cheaper than the long-range Model Y, because Tesla knows there's already a tremendous amount of demand and a lot of public interest in this Texas-made model, and they have to somehow make sure that the long-range Model Y coming out of Fremont still seems like a good deal. Otherwise, everyone would order the Texas-made model. So now, within the coming weeks, I predict Tesla is going to launch the all-wheel drive Model Y, no long-range name attached to it, and the range is about 50 miles worse, and the price isn't even that much better. It's probably only going to be like $3,000 or $5,000 cheaper than the long-range Model Y. And the reason I don't think it'll be that much more affordable, despite the lower range, is because the price difference between the Model 3 rear-wheel drive and the Model 3 long-range is only $7,000. And there's a big difference between those two models. Rear-wheel drive, of course, only has one motor versus long-range has two, and the range difference is much greater in that comparison. It's closer to like a 70-mile range difference, whereas the Model Y range difference would only be around 50, and they still both are going to have dual motor powertrains, and probably the 4680 Model Y is going to be much lighter, so I wouldn't put it past Tesla to make the all-wheel drive version actually a little bit faster. Maybe the 0 to 60 is closer to 4 seconds instead of 4.8 seconds, and Tesla will still brag about how great a deal this is, because 279 miles is plenty, and you still get all-wheel drive, which means it's great in the snow, and maybe it has some better handling thanks to the more centralized weight savings. But of course, there will still be a ton of people saying, yeah, but I really wanted over 300 miles of range, and because this one doesn't offer that, I guess I'm still gonna go with the Fremont option. So effectively, Tesla wants to evenly split the Model Y order backlog so that you have a healthy but not too much number of people wanting the Giga Texas model. And you know, there's a bunch of battery freaks out there that watch these types of YouTube videos, or people like Sandy Monroe that are gonna want to check out the new Model Y with the structural pack, so they're gonna buy the Texas-made model. Doesn't even matter if it doesn't go 300 miles on a charge. Everyone else is just gonna be admiring how cheap it is to build, the manufacturing efficiencies of this new design, whereas other demographics are gonna say, nah, range matters most to me, so that's why I'm gonna go forward with the Fremont model. And again, if the price is substantially lower for this Texas-made model, there's gonna be way too much demand for it, and Tesla's not gonna be able to handle that. They're just gonna have another tremendous tremendously big backlog just at their new factory, and then they're going to have a surplus of Model Ys at the old factory, which is not a good scenario. So after weighing out all the different options, I don't think Fremont wants to shut down any of their current Model Y assembly lines, because clearly there's a huge backlog of people willing to pay around $60,000 for a 330-mile range Model Y. They don't want to complicate that with an LFP chemistry, which they're going to have to sell for cheaper. And again, they don't want the Texas-made Model Y to be that much more affordable. So I'm predicting maybe even restrict it to the central and east coast. So maybe this configurator won't even update if you're on the west coast. But when Giga Texas comes online and gets final approval for customer deliveries, Tesla will update the website with like a $57,000 or $58,000 all-wheel drive Model Y with 279 miles of range. Yes, it will have the new batteries and the new cells, but it's going to come at a cost of the value not being insanely good, which is a bit of a bummer on the consumer side of things, but this is one of the reasons I was more comfortable not going forward with the Model Y, because it's not a buyer's market right now. Tesla can basically afford to sell people their crap, and they know people will buy it because the demand backlog is tremendous. And I do think that this concept will prioritize Tesla's mission statement of accelerating the transition to sustainable energy. Using less cells per vehicle and lowering the cost of building each of these Model Ys is going to result in very, very huge profit margins on every Model Y Texas builds. It allows the ramp to go much smoother because they won't need as many cells, and if rumors are correct, the 4680 cell is not being built at an insane rate quite yet. But the good news is, in the future, if Tesla wants to start adding higher density 4680 cells as that battery cell production ramps up, they will easily be able to beat the specs of the current long-range Model Y when they feel good and ready for it. I think offering the standard range all-wheel drive option will be a perfect entry point to get people interested in the concept of, okay, I can buy a Texas-made model. It's not very good yet, but I at least know how to buy one. That way the demand for that configuration is not too crazy. And yes, I predict a lot of people will probably be disappointed by these range numbers and these specs because they were hoping for something crazy and off the charts. But as time goes on and they're able to ramp those cells, then they can increase the amount of energy in each Model Y. And once they catch up on all these orders at multiple factories, they could easily make a 350 or 400 mile range Model Y based on the range increase opportunities and the cost efficiencies they talked about at Battery Day. I think what we missed when watching those Battery Day presentations is that these new chemistries and these new cells allow for range increase opportunities. Doesn't necessarily mean those range increases are going to be effective as of immediately. And if Tesla is able to divert a large amount of Model Y demand to a slightly cheaper model, because I could already imagine a ton of people being like, I don't care what the range is, I just want a Model Y, buying the cheaper Texas-made Model Y, then the backlog will shrink slowly over time for the long-range model, and once Tesla is able to catch up with demand, that's when you'll actually see them start prioritizing higher range numbers to incentivize people to buy more, or they just start lowering prices overall to expand the addressable market. In fact, in the future, when Giga Texas is at a run rate of like 500,000 Model Ys per year, that's when I could see Fremont start making standard range Model Ys again, or lithium iron phosphate Model Ys in the future, but not quite yet. The only reason I don't believe the standard range Model Y listed on the EPA is LFP is because it's literally the exact same specifications of the standard range Model Y they offered for like 1 month last year, and that one had 2170 cells. If they had made the switch to LFP, we would see a difference in the efficiency somewhere in there, just like we saw a difference in efficiency with the Model 3 with 2170 cells back when it was called Standard Range Plus, and then they transitioned to LFP. We saw some range numbers change, we saw the efficiency numbers change. We didn't see that with the standard range Model Y, so my prediction is we're not going to see that this year at all. They probably just registered it for a formality, or if the ramp at Giga Texas goes really, really well, maybe they'll introduce the standard range Model Y again at the very end of 2022, but again, that's all dependent on how quickly Giga Texas can ramp up. I hate to be the bearer of bad news if there were a bunch of people out there that were just like, I want the 4680 battery above all else, and now you're finding out, actually the range is going to be worse than the 2170 cell option, but your cycle life should be much better. It might allow for better charging times, not to mention people who get this Model Y from Texas are going to have way better quality control, way better paint quality, and possibly a better 0 to 60 time, because the weight savings on this model should be pretty good. If you disagree with me, or you're finding holes in my theory, feel free to let me know down below. Thanks to everyone supporting the channel over on Patreon. It seriously helps a ton, as does just watching these videos. So take care all, and have a great day.